Greetings and welcome everyone. In today's video, I want to share my top 5 lessons that I learned after 19 years of being a spiritual practitioner and being a spiritual helper for others. Things that help with building spiritual flow, overcoming resistance, and filling the spiritual cup so that we can go out and better serve others, those who we are called and meant to serve. After 19 years of being a spiritual practitioner, I definitely picked up some patterns and some principles along the way, helping people with things like ceremony, plant medicines, and spiritual alignment. These are the top 5 lessons that I like to teach and that I feel called and compassionate about teaching and using in my own life so that I can go out and better serve others, the people who I am called and meant to serve. So with that, lesson number 1 on my list today would be building spiritual flow and maintaining spiritual flow. So at about 21 years of age, I like to hang out with my friends like most 21-year-olds and watch movies, play basketball, and just have a pretty casual social life like many others my age. And when it came time to lead a community function and when it came time for me to help my community, I found it was at times hard to find the words and hard to overcome the friction. Whenever you're standing up before a group, sometimes it's hard to get that spiritual flow going. So as time went along, I noticed that there was a spiritual momentum that had to be built and maintained over time. In our everyday walk of life, we could do things like nature walks, meditation, burning our incense and doing our songs and our dances and our prayer. If not on a daily basis, at least on a weekly basis, that this would maintain a spiritual flow and a spiritual charge in our everyday life. So during my early phases at being a spiritual practitioner, I noticed that if I maintained that momentum and that if I built that flow in my everyday life, when it came time to help others, everything just came together naturally. I was able to find the words, I was able to find the right vibration and just the right spiritual flow when I was singing my songs and performing my duties in a spiritual capacity. So that would be the first lesson that I like to speak about a lot, is maintaining spiritual flow and building spiritual momentum in our everyday life. If not every day, at least on a regular basis. So now we have lesson number 2 that I call the Sermon on the Mount principle. And I call it the Sermon on the Mount principle because I heard somebody explaining that when the Sermon on the Mount was given, that there was these different categories of people in the audience. And you find this to be true within the general population, that there's this 80-20 rule within everything in the universe. And so I heard it said that on the Sermon on the Mount that there were the laughers, the mockers, there was the indifferent, the perplexed, and there were the believers. And as time went along on my spiritual journey, I found that I didn't resonate with everybody. Sometimes there would be older men folks that would kind of laugh and scoff because I was a younger man trying to facilitate community functions at the time. And there were people who were just kind of indifferent. Even though we tried to help them, they weren't really ready to receive that help at that time in their life. And then we have the believers, the people who you are meant to serve on any given day. There's a percentage of people that we are meant and called to help. People that resonate with your words, people that vibe with your style of teaching, people that who are meant to be your friends and meant to be your allies. So that would be much the same in creating content. There's a certain fraction of people that we're meant to resonate with. There's a certain fraction of people that we're meant to speak to and that we're meant to help on this journey of being in service to others. So that leads me to lesson number 3, which would be kinship to everyone and kinship to everything. Some cultures refer to this as mitakuye oyasi, which means we're all related. And that applies to all of the plants, all of the animals, the universe, the earth, the air, the wind, water, fire, the sun, the moon. And this concept of kinship is profound because if we approach everything as being a part of us, as being one big family, we find that the universe will reciprocate that energy back to us. For example, when we speak to plants as if they're a family member, we find that these plants react to us when we acknowledge these things that average people would consider inanimate objects. When we acknowledge the animals, when we acknowledge the trees, the earth, the water that we drink. There's so many studies done on this reciprocity when we approach everything as kin. And of course, this applies to when we treat each other as kin folks and we're compassionate and we are kind to others. We find that that energy is always reciprocated back to us somehow. If it doesn't come directly from the person, it's reciprocated back to us energetically throughout the universe. So that would be lesson number 3, is this understanding of kinship. And I also would like to make mention as a side note that when we approach everything with kinship, we also find ourselves receiving intuitive downloads, intuitive dreams, and that we wouldn't have received otherwise if we approached every entity as something that wasn't a part of us or inanimate. Okay, so now we're on to number 4, which is everything from the heart will resonate. And I speak about this from time to time on social media, that if we do things from the heart, if we do things with compassion and love and joy, that energy and that vibration is sometimes going to speak louder than what our words can say. And I apply this to speaking. I apply this principle to even teaching, when it comes to teaching young children, or when it comes to speaking to friends or family, that if we do things with this higher vibration of energy and love, you'll find that this energy will resonate more than what the actual words are saying at the time. The reason why I talk about this lesson a lot is when I first started my spiritual practice, I found myself having to speak to crowds and groups and speak to people who were sometimes double, quadruple my age. And I noticed at times that I wouldn't always align perfectly with the intellectual level that different people at different ages were on. But as time went along, I just found that if I were to speak from the heart and I were to speak with love and compassion, that the people that I was meant to speak to on that day and the people who I was meant to serve on that particular day would always catch my energy more than they would catch my words. And they would find themselves receiving the encouragement, maybe the inspiration, maybe the ideas that they needed to receive on that particular time in their life. So again, lesson number 4 would be everything that is done from the heart will resonate. So as long as we set the dial in our heart on a north star of love and compassion, we'll find ourselves always finding the correct words and the correct actions in a capacity to serve others. And last, at number 5, we have the divine laws of 7. This is a topic that I like to speak about a lot. I'm very compassionate about these divine laws of 7. The divine laws of 7 have been very helpful to me in understanding energy alignment and generational healing. And just overall, the number 7 appears a lot throughout spirituality. So the divine laws of 7 include things like the 7 directions. This is something that I practice every day. I call upon the 7 directions in formulating a protective structure around my body. And I've spoken about this in a previous video where we acknowledge these deities in the 7 directions. We have the 4 cardinal directions around us. We have the sky, and we have the earth, and then we have the center point. And we call upon these deities in the 7 directions when we ask for guidance, when we ask for insights and healing and protection in general. And after the 7 directions, we have our 7 energy centers, or the 7 chakras, in which we pay real close attention to these energy centers when we're doing alignment and healing work, when we're helping people to build that spiritual energy and to clear any negative blocks or heavy energy that exists within their field. And in addition to the 7 chakras, we also have the 7 ports to the face. And this is a fairly simple topic, but it's also profound because we don't pay a lot of attention to these 7 ports and what we absorb in the body through our breath, the things that we hear, negative or positive, the things that we see that might be negative or positive, and how we absorb sunlight through the body, and how we partake in pure water and pure food, whatever the case might be. These 7 ports and having this principle of what we absorb in the mind, heart, body, and spirit plays a huge part in who we are becoming energetically on a daily basis. So we have the 7 ports to the face. And last, one of my favorites is this concept of the 7 generations. This is a pretty important topic for myself as a spiritual practitioner and a spiritual helper for others, because it helps us to understand that healing goes beyond time and space. It teaches us that energetically we're a direct result of our generations before us, and that we could also connect with our future selves and our future generations, and that we could oscillate in between the past and the future, energetically and spiritually connected metaphysically beyond time and space. And that when we call upon our higher selves, our more healed selves, we can bring those energies and those downloads and ideas to ourselves in the present. That we could also go back and heal our generations if we were to do the work energetically now within our chakra system, within our mind, heart, body, and spirit. So this is something that we keep in mind a lot in doing energy alignment work and advising people in a spiritual manner. So those would be some of the most impactful and potent lessons that I learned on my 19 years of being a spiritual helper to others. And it's something that I feel compelled to share more and more on my journey to helping others and doing more events and educating more people on these topics. There's so many nuances and so many divine principles within spirituality that I don't think anybody would ever know it all. But I definitely think that we can find patterns and principles that would prove to be very helpful to us as we're continuing to learn. If anything today resonated with you, I have an earth-based spirituality guide that I've been sharing with others where I talk about these topics more in depth. And I'm also going to be hosting a free energy alignment event here very soon. I will place the link for this class in the description under the video for anybody who feels called to learn and to engage in more in-depth discussion about these topics. Also today, before we conclude, I wanted to share a story about the feather. An analogy of life. So as we look at the feather, it's very beautiful, it's very symmetrical, and it's built on divine blueprints of life. It was created by nature and the universe. And in a lot of ways, it could be compared to our life. So in life, things can throw us off balance. We can get thrown out of shape. We can be bent this way and bent that way. And in life, our thoughts and our emotions, our body could be thrown out of place. But much like the feather, our life is built for resiliency. We're built to last, and we're built to have the ability to renew ourselves. If we are able to follow our divine practices, our spirituality, our meditations, using nature's medicine, using nature's elements, bit by bit, we have the ability to renew the mind, to renew our thoughts, renew our emotions, renew the body. As long as we have a consistent connection to our divine practices and our divine principles, our alignment ceremonies, we can find ourselves being able to overcome and to renew the mind, heart, body, and spirit. I always enjoyed this analogy and the comparison to the feather to our life. It's always a good reminder that we have the ability built within us to renew the self and to recharge ourselves in the times in life when we feel out of alignment. So I really enjoy speaking on these topics and looking forward to sharing more in detail and in depth in future videos. But in the meantime, be well, be blessed, and I will see you soon.